Get higher, baby. Get higher, baby. Get higher, girl. Hey.
Go. Hello, everyone. I'm Ryan Knight, and I'm joined tonight by my brother, Bo Knight. And we are the Knights of the Pageless Library. And tonight we are here to talk about Stephen King's The Shining. And before we get into it real quick, just want to drop some real quick plugs. So if anybody wants to contact us about anything and everything, you could email us at kotpl.pod@gmail.com. Get a hold of us on Twitter, and it is at Pageless Library. YouTube, over there, Knights of the Pageless Library, and Facebook at Knights of the Pageless Library. We are still waiting on our first piece of hate mail.
Yeah, and I mean, like when Ryan says anything, like you can email us about anything. You want to know our favorite recipes? Boom, we'll tell you.
Yeah.
You just have to reach out to us. We'll tell you anything.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason we started this. We just want to have conversations. So if anybody wants to get a hold of us for any reason, by all means.
And we got this book, as always. It's from Audible. There's no other place really to get audiobooks if you're serious about listening to audiobooks.
Yeah, it just makes it way too easy.
Yeah, it really does. And don't freaking be that guy that just goes and looks and like listens to freaking the audiobook in 15-minute clips on YouTube from some guy that's reading it himself. Like that.
Yeah.
Just don't do that.
Yeah, like
Please.
Rod Zombie.
Yeah, Rob Zombie reads this book too.
No. It's not Rob Zombie with a B. It's
Rod with a D.
With a D.
See,
yes.
I didn't even look at it that closely.
I only know that because I clicked on it to see how it sounded, and I was like, when was Rob Zombie British? It is not Rob Zombie.
Huh.
Yeah. So.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, as we said, tonight we're here to talk about The Shining by Stephen King. This book was written in 1977, I believe.
Yep, correct.
The audio version we're listening to was published by Random House in 2005.
Oh, and it is narrated by Campbell Scott.
Campbell Scott, yep. So we like to talk about the genre, and we like to talk a little bit about the author. Stephen King is not a man that needs really an introduction. Although
he shouldn't be.
We were talking about a little bit before we started the podcast, though. Everybody just assumes Stephen King only writes horror novels, and that's not necessarily true. And for anyone who has heard like, oh, I heard the movie's really scary, I would definitely recommend going to listen to this book because it's gonna kind of change your mind a little bit about the movie.
And I can't speak to this because I've never actually seen the movie, and I think this is a good time to talk about it now. Next week, me and Ryan are actually going to look at the Shining movie and a little documentary about it too. That's just something that we wanted to include.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of look at we're going to compare and contrast kind of like how Stephen King's story is portrayed in a video form, and like just kind of like the differences and those kind of things, and kind of like the overall feel and the effectiveness of the story it's trying to tell. And so we're gonna take a look at that next week. So I actually have a frame of reference for the movie too, because I've only ever listened to the book now.
Right. And I haven't seen the movie in a long time, so I'm gonna rent it and rewatch it, and then next week we will talk about our thoughts between the two, between this book and that movie. So stick around for that if that sounds interesting. As I said, Stephen King doesn't really need much of an introduction. But I do think it's worth mentioning here that Campbell Scott, I don't know if they could have picked someone better to narrate this book.
Me neither.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, like, when, a lot of this is from a couple different perspectives. I mean, you're talking mostly Danny and why am I blanking on Jack's name? Jeez, so most of this is from Danny and Jack's perspective, but I feel like Campbell Scott's voice is exactly the voice I would picture Jack having for me.
Yeah.
That's what was weird about it to me. I was like, oh yeah, this is, by the tone of the way he talks and stuff, this guy nails it. I mean, I think Campbell Scott killed it on this one. He did such a good job.
He does do a very good job. And I mean, it's like it's a classic for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
So
not
the
just because it's a
audiobook-
Stephen King book either. That's not what
Right,
makes
and-
it a classic.
No, I mean there is a reason too why Stephen King has written under many pen names, just to prove to people that he can write so well.
Yeah.
So The Shining is a horror. It's a horror novel. I mean, I feel like you probably know that a little bit, no matter who you are. You've at least probably heard the movie talked about.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure most people have heard of The Shining. Yeah.
So it is about 15 hours and 50 minutes. So it's actually kind of long.
Yeah. So right at about
These-
16 hours.
It's decently. I think the pacing is about perfect too, though. And okay, how much is it? You can buy it on Audible right now for $33.60 if you wanted to buy it, or if you just had your Audible trial already, you could use one of your tokens on it, and you wouldn't be out $30, which is actually
get it
less.
for free. I mean, and you can get it for free too if you signed up for Audible and use this as your first free book, which would be I don't know if I'd recommend that, but and we'll get into a little bit as to why. But for me personally, I don't know if I'd recommend.
It'd be a hell
this.
of an introduction.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't think there's any way more so to jump off feet first into audiobooks than this. So, and we'll get into that a little more once we kind of pass the spoiler wall and start talking about the book.
So I would say it was easy to follow, but it is. I feel like if you're kind of daydreaming, you're gonna miss a lot of the nuance.
So I agree with that. I would say it's easy to follow as long as you are paying attention.
Yeah.
However, just like you said, if you miss even a sentence, you might find yourself absolutely lost.
Yeah.
Because we get a lot of flashbacks, we get a lot of daydreaming, we get a lot of change of scene very quickly.
Dude, I'm okay. Obviously, I'm recommending this. So I'm gonna be real with you guys, but Stephen King's like one sentence descriptions of like certain scenes that are happening are masterful, dude. They are so good.
Absolutely.
Because he says like one word about, like, he'll say like one sentence about a person, and you can kind of tell exactly what their personality is like, and like the way that they're holding themselves, the way that they're talking, like you can tell already all of that from one sentence.
Yeah, and he, like you said, masterful is a great word, because exactly what you're saying, it's very easy when you're listening to this to almost have this painted in front of your face as you're listening to it.
This is going to be a little spoilery, but when he meets the like caretaker in the beginning, and he's like blowing his nose, and he's like removes handkerchief, honks, looks, tucks back in pocket.
Yeah. Quick peek. Yep.
Yeah, quick peek. That's what he says. Like, it's so beautiful.
Right.
Like how he lays that out.
Yeah. I thought so too, and it's such a simple thing.
It is a simple
most
thing.
people would probably overlook, but I mean, it does. It builds it. What it does for me is it just builds that character, like you said. One sentence. Okay, I'm in. I know this guy now. I got it.
And but then I think at the end, and he does the opposite with the main characters to me, because like when you first get introduced to Jack and like where he ends up going as a character are so vastly different.
Sure.
So I mean, I want to get past the spoilers because I wanted to talk about this for like 4 days.
So let's real quick, as Bo said, Bo's going to recommend this. I'm going to recommend this not as your first audiobook though. To me, while this is easy to follow if you're paying attention, like I said, this is an advanced listen for lack of a better term, because Stephen King's writing is not super simple to follow usually, because it's very heavily descriptive. It jumps around a lot, and we're bouncing back and forth between perspectives a lot. There's nothing wrong with that by any means. I very much so enjoyed this book. I was very glad I got to listen to this. However, I just don't recommend this for somebody's first time. I would say, test the waters, see how good you are following along with other books of a simpler genre or of a simpler nature than this, because I think this, if somebody jumped in feet first and they thought, I'm going to sign up for Audible and I'm going to get The Shining and listen to it first, it might be a little bit, you might find yourself a lot being like, wait a minute, what's happening? And rewind it. And I don't think that's going to make it super enjoyable.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, this isn't even like the most not that complicated of a book compared to some of the stuff we've already looked at.
Sure,
but
I mean,
I do totally agree with you that like this is not where you should start.
That's just my opinion.
No, I agree with you. I mean, but like I think like I would recommend this for like anybody Stephen King fan. Why like, and I'm kind of mad at myself that I'm like just now getting around to it because it's so good.
Yeah, same here actually. I mean, I like I said, I had seen the movie a long time ago, and I remember bits and pieces of the movie. But yeah, I'm kind of mad that I hadn't listened to this book a long time ago, even when it came out back in like 2005. That would have been great. But that's just my recommendation to people is get your feet wet somewhere else, and then maybe come to this once you find because like some people I know can't really listen to audiobooks. They just have a hard time doing that. So I'm just saying, maybe if you are on the fence about how you listen to audiobooks or if you're going to enjoy it, I wouldn't recommend starting with this one because it is, in my opinion, it's a little more of an advanced listen.
And to like, I would say be a little wary if you're not a big fan of horror.
Sure. And this is is a horror book. However, it's not like for anyone who's seen the movie, I would just say don't let that be what you think it's going to be. I'll just leave it at that because while it is a horror, it's definitely more of a psychological, like kind of thriller horror than like a slasher type horror.
I wouldn't even say like it's a thriller horror. It's just more like psychological horror, like you said, but not quite in the sense of like Lovecraft, just kind of the sense of like dealing with human trauma.
Sure. Well, it's very like surreal. A lot of it is very surreal.
Yeah.
So with that, let's go ahead and pass the spoiler wall and let's start talking about this story. So for anybody who wants to listen, please, by all means, go out, get the book from Audible, preferably. But get the book wherever you want to get the book, listen to it, and then come back, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. And then email us and share your thoughts on it.
Yeah, and you'd be like, Scrubs, you didn't even talk about the part. Yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah, that's what we're waiting for. So,
So, I mean, you kind of already mentioned it, but we can talk about it again. So the story is basically like first-person perspective, but it kind of jumps around. I think there's 4 different people that we see through the eyes of, right?
For the most part, yeah. It's
because Jack.
It's not even really. Is it through their eyes or is it more? It's more like a third person over the shoulder most of the time.
But you hear what's going on in their head too, though.
Well, that's actually very true. Yeah, because
like,
you hear Jack's thoughts, you hear Danny's thoughts. Yeah, that's true.
Because they'll be doing something and then they're like thinking about like something else. Because like Jack's big thing is that he was an alcoholic and he doesn't drink anymore. But like almost whenever he's doing anything, he's like, I could use a drink worse than I've ever needed a drink in my life. Doesn't matter what he's doing.
Right. Yeah, he always says a drink would make this better or a drink would help. Yeah. You're right. And so that's an interesting thing. I actually didn't even really think about that. And that's another reason I think Stephen King is, kind of the master at this, is he can basically, he describes the scene. So like Danny's sitting on the curb, playing with his little airplane or whatever. And then,
this is actually a perfect scene to talk about right
Yeah,
away.
and then boom, we're right in his head, and you're right. He's thinking about things. So now we're hearing from his perspective what he's thinking. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We're bouncing back and forth between kind of third and first person, just so
So
he's filling in all those gaps for you. It's very
right,
well
he
done.
is. And so basically, if you were to like zoom out on The Shining and to see like the big main pieces of it, so this family is going to take care of the Overlook Hotel, which is actually in Colorado, and I kind of want to go. It's actually based on a real place too, and I want to go check it out because I
Yeah,
don't think
that's
it's
cool.
too far away from where I live now.
The only thing I have to add to that is that the hotel used in the movie was the one up at Mount Hood, and I've actually been there. I've never been in the
Oh,
hotel,
I've
but
I've been to the
I was
hotel there actually. I didn't know that.
yeah, that's the hotel they used in the movie. Yeah.
So there, Jack is basically coming to be the winter caretaker. And I mean, we'll talk a little bit about more of why he's kind of pinched into this position. But and the Overlook kind of has a history of like weird, hinky things going on.
But you don't really find that out until later.
Right, you don't. Yeah, you don't. Like coming into it, like so Danny kind of has. I don't even know how to like word it. He kind of gets a feeling that going to the Overlook is going to like be the death of his family. And he's
Yeah,
only 5.
because
Should know stuff like this.
yeah, I did find that pretty weird. We find out really early on um, that Danny can sort of almost feel other people's thoughts and hear other people's thoughts, and he can also like jump into other people's heads and see through their eyes maybe what they're seeing or hearing at that exact moment in time. So he sort of has like, I don't know, telepathic type abilities basically. We find that out pretty early on.
Yeah. And I don't even know. So like when they like all they're kind of like, they pack up and he kind of gives you snippets about their past, which I love. Like I mean you like we kind of like meet Jack at the beginning and you're kind of sympathetic to him. He's like a man that's down on his luck. He lost his teaching job and so he's like taking one of his buddies, actually one of his old drinking buddies is helping him out because he's like the owner of the Overlook, right? And so he's letting him be the caretaker over the winter season just to give him a job.
Well, Al knows the guy that's the current quote unquote owner. That's the dude
Oh, okay.
that's the dude that Jack meets in the beginning. Yeah, that Al basically helps him in there, yeah. And Al, like you said, Al's his old drinking buddy back when Jack was a teacher. And they used to get sloshed together and then go drinking and driving and do all kinds of stupid stuff.
Well, and we kind of like figure out like that was obviously not a good way to live your life because one night he came home and Jack's also a writer, by the way, because Stephen King only knows how to write about writers apparently.
Yeah.
And he comes home one night and Danny had like spilled a beer on a bunch of his papers that he was working on, and he like goes to turn him around, but he turns him around too hard and breaks his arm.
Yeah, and Danny's only like 3 at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, he turned him around to spank him, and he broke Danny's arm he was spinning him around because Jack was drunk off his ass.
Drunk off his ass, yeah.
Yeah. He also, the one night, we find out a little bit later, him and Al were driving in Al's car, and Jack was driving, and
No, Al was driving.
Oh, was Al driving?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Either way, they hit
Al...
something, and they got out wondering what it was, and they found a bicycle, but they don't know if there was a person on it. Still, they don't know. They think maybe it was parked on the side of the road. That was a pretty weird thing. They looked for hours to see if they could find somebody that they had hit, but they couldn't find anyone.
And Jack was a teacher at a high school. It was like high school, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of find out like right away that he has a lot of anger issues and a lot of like temper stuff. And I mean, a lot of that is shown through like his eyes when he's thinking about stuff. Like that he has a lot of like pent up rage and stuff like that. And so basically this kid was on his debate team and he was like a good debater, but he stuttered. And so he would like have a
Only
hard time.
only once he started debating, did he stutter.
Right.
Which is
And
kinda
I
weird.
actually love the whole arc of this little bit of story of how it tells it to you. So the kid accuses him of cutting his time short. And at first he's like, "No, I didn't do any of that. You just stuttered and you couldn't get your point across." And the kid like freaks out and yells at him. And I mean even in his head he's like, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." And then later he's like thinking about it again and he's like even if I did cut your time back, I only cut it back by like a minute, maybe a
Yeah.
minute and a half. And like
Yep.
he keeps admitting it to himself that he actually did do that.
Right.
And I mean the whole reason he lost his job was because the kid popped his tires and Jack just came unglued and just beats the tar out of the kid.
Yeah,
Like-
he does. Yeah. So you're talking a full grown, you're talking a probably late 20s man. Yeah, he beats the shit out of the 17-year-old kid in the parking lot of the school, and there's like all these other staff members and there's all these other
Well,
kids watching it.
And he even says like it's time to take your medicine, right?
Yeah, which is a great tie-in, to later. Which we also find out too that a lot of the times Jack would show up to work like super hungover. So probably still a little drunk every morning he would show up to work, which didn't help the whole situation.
But when we first get introduced to Jack, he's actually like kind of on the straight and narrow, and he's like trying to get his life back together. He's writing this play that he's been working on, and like the family unit actually is kind of good. When we come, I mean, obviously they have their issues. Any place where when somebody breaks somebody's arm as a kid, like I feel like there's always going to be a little bit of tension in the house.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so we have so like we said, it's Jack, and then Danny is his 5-year-old son, and then Wendy is Jack's wife. And so Jack gets the job to be the caretaker for the Overlook Hotel. And so they're going to end up packing up all their stuff and they move up there from Denver to stay at the Overlook for the winter. They end up, I can't remember what month it is when they get there.
it's like the end of September.
I think end of September, and then they won't be done until around March is when everybody else is supposed to return back to the hotel for work. And then so he's already heard stories too of like the previous caretaker having stayed there with his 2 young daughters and his wife, and supposedly the previous caretaker killed his family and himself while he was taking care of the place because he got like cabin fever while he was there, couldn't handle it. So from the beginning, we kind of already get this, like, we're starting to already get a little bit of hints as to what the Overlook kind of does to people, basically, from the get-go.
Yeah. And they do talk about a lot, like, too, like, it's a place where a lot of people have died, because it's like a hot spot for like older people to come and have like their last hurrah at like sex, and that's not always a good idea, and people have like heart attacks and like so pretty much every room has had somebody die in it.
Yeah, well, and we're definitely we're explaining all this because you find out all this stuff later in the book, but it makes more sense to explain it in the beginning if you're going to explain the book to someone. Because exactly, the hotel went through this time also where it was basically run by mobsters, and the mobsters would go up there and they would gamble and they would do money trades and they would end up killing each other in the hotel. So the hotel has a very rich past of violence, basically.
So I think I'm gonna cut let's cut to when they meet Halloran for the first time.
Okay, so when they basically get to the hotel, when they're moving to it for the first time, because Jack has already been there. Jack went up there. That's where he's at when he gets the job, and the owner has the maintenance man kind of show Jack what he's going to need to be doing while he's there. And then Jack goes home, gets his family, comes back, and then we meet Halloran.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, Halloran, I feel like is a good. He's kind of like the central like anchor point for the story, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense to me, yeah.
So like Halloran, when they meet Halloran, immediately he's like talking to Danny like they're old friends, and they're like saying things back and forth to each other that there's no way they would know that about the other person. Like there's no way they could know that without having met them before.
Right. Like Halloran calls Danny Doc.
Which is what his parents call him.
Right. And Wendy says, "How did you know that? How did you know we call him that?" And Halloran says, "What do you mean?" Like he's always
he looks
known
like
that.
a Doc, yeah.
Yeah, he plays it off like,
And,
like, oh yeah, he looks like one.
And then Halloran's like, "What's my name?" And at this point, we only know him as Halloran. And then Danny's like says, "Dick to your friends." He's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
then you can call me Dick because I'm your friend."
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So right away we get this weird kind of like, as the listener, we're like, wait a minute, what's happening? Well, you find out really quickly that Halloran also is Go ahead.
So Halloran, like, you know, he's talking to Danny, and he's like, "Oh, come to Florida with me. You can go crab fishing, and you don't have to stay up in the cold." And he's like, "No, I don't need to do that." And then so Halloran gets Danny to help him with his bags, and they kind of sit in his car, and Halloran tells him that Danny has the Shining. Yeah. And he's the most powerful Shining person that Halloran has ever met in his whole life.
Yeah, and Danny's only 5, by the way. Yeah. I mean, to remind people. So he's just a little kid. And while they're sitting in the car, they end up having most of a conversation without ever actually opening their mouths. Yeah. They basically just telepathically communicate with each other. Which is what we kind of find out the Shining is the ability to sense things, or basically telepathy, or it's psychic like type of
foresight
stuff. Kind of, but like I said too, though, he can like talk to people or understand their thoughts at the same time too, or even from far away, or telepathy's not the right kind of word because he can't like move stuff with his mind really, but
no. But so then Halloran tells Danny, he's like, if you ever get in really big trouble, just call out for me, like in your head, like as hard as you can, and I might hear you in Florida. And if I do, I'll come help you.
Right.
And he tells him to stay out of room
217.
217. Yeah, something nasty happened in 217. But then Halloran also explains that like he's seen some weird things while he's at the hotel, but those things can't hurt you. Like they're just weird. They're just like weird things that you see. They can't actually hurt you. Yeah.
It's like a picture in a book.
Right.
So he tells Danny, he said, if you see any of this scary stuff, just close your eyes and turn away, and when you turn around, it'll be gone. Can't hurt you.
So and then they keep going through the hotel, and then they like make a big point about the boiler, because the boiler, it like creeps up in temperature.
The pressure.
Pressure, not temperature. I don't know why I said temperature. So it creeps up in pressure, and it has to be like bled off every day, or it'll explode.
Yeah, and the maintenance guy is big on. He's like, it's safe up to 250, but I don't even know if I'd let it get to 180 because it's like a piece of shit. It's old. It's got patches all over in it. So he said it scares him. Yeah, the normal year-round maintenance guy.
Well, and he says you better watch the boiler, or your whole family will end up on the fucking moon.
Yeah, yeah. Which Danny reiterates several times because.
Well, so does Jack. Jack thinks about it in those terms too.
Yeah,
which is cool, because they don't ever like talk about that character again. But he'll say like, I gotta bleed the pressure off, or we'll end up on the fucking moon.
Right. Yeah, it is very well done too that he keeps referring to that. It is that because that's how. You or I, you don't think about that, but that is like if you think about something, like if you're remembering something that somebody told you, you're going to associate something about that conversation to the thought. So for Stephen King to keep him doing that, it does. I mean, it's very incredible how he does that.
And so the Overlook is also special because it has this roque court, which is like croquet kind of. I didn't really understand roque.
I didn't really understand it either. I just know it was like a version of croquet and then that's why they're spelled similar. Roque and croquet. It's just like a whatever where the letters are flipped around. I didn't fully. It's the same concept. It's balls and a mallet. That's all we. That's kind of the important part.
And it has this like immaculate hedge maze of a bunch of different animals that Jack has to take care of.
Right. Until it starts snowing, obviously. He just has to
Right.
keep them trimmed up before it snows.
Oh, and he also has to like change the shingles on the roof.
Yeah, that was at first I was like, that's a weird point to bring up because that's really how's he going to make this important? And he does. He makes it very important in a very bizarre way.
Yeah, and it's I don't know. It is a good. I think that's a good like. There's something weird going on.
Yeah.
So Jack, let's just talk about the shingles now because I feel like they come up first, right?
Yeah. So basically, what ends up happening is like after they finish talking to Halloran and all that, everybody else leaves, and now it's just Jack, Wendy, and Danny are the only ones there at the hotel because he's now the caretaker. And for a short time, it's still kind of fall, so he has all this work that he wants to get done before it starts snowing. And they also end up running down to Sidewinder, right? That's the town.
Yeah.
So they make a couple trips back and forth to Sidewinder. But yeah, the next thing that Jack needs to do is he wants to fix the shingles before the weather gets bad.
And while he's fixing the shingles, he finds like this bee's nest or wasp nest, and he kills all the wasps in it with his bug bomb. And he wants to give it to Danny because he had one as a kid that he kept in his room. And he was like, "Oh, I should give this to Danny so Danny has like a way to remember our time at this place."
Yeah, and it sounds like it's huge, like a basketball.
It is huge.
Yeah, gigantic freaking wasp nest.
And he gives it to Danny, and he assures everybody that all the bees are dead. And then like the next scene is Danny just like waking up in pain, and he's just stung by a bunch of wasps. Like they're just like pouring out of the fucking beehive or wasp nest.
They're all over like Danny's hand, mostly stinging his hand.
Yeah.
And then Jack sees that the nest above his bed, they're crawling all over it again.
Which should be impossible.
Yeah, he's like, that's impossible. I did exactly what it said on the can. I used the whole can, and yeah. It ties in later in the story though, so.
And so Danny like ends up going to the doctor after this because they're worried about him because all the stings. And like Danny kind of comes clean to the doctor about like having the shining and stuff like that. And the doctor doesn't really believe him. He just thinks he's really smart, and he's like intuitive and just knows things because he's a smart kid.
Right.
And like the parents don't really believe it, which I thought was funny. They don't really listen to the doctor at all.
Well, especially Wendy knows though that like something's going on with Danny, because she said there's been several times like, well, it kind of goes into a real quick thing about she agrees with like the things the doctor says, but then we get a real quick snippet in her head of like, she would think like, oh man, I need to return those library books today. And later on, she'd walk in the kitchen and all the library books would be sitting there with her library card. Yeah. So she never said anything to Danny, but Danny clearly heard her thoughts. So like, she knows there's something going on with Danny. She just doesn't know what it is.
Well, and Danny also talked to the doctor about that his parents are thinking about getting a divorce, even though they've never even said that out loud to each other.
Yeah. Yep. Especially never to Danny, but he knows that both of them have been thinking about divorce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think the next thing that happens is the hedges, right?
Yep, that's.
So Jack goes out one day to trim the hedges, and he's like, he's trimming them, and he's like really good at it. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that was kind of funny that he's pretty handy man. It sounded like. But so he goes out to trim these hedges, and there's like a bunny rabbit, there's like a dog, and some lions, and some other stuff out there, and so he trims up the bunny's belly and the bunny's ears because the bunny's kind of sitting on its hind haunches, and then he goes to trim the dog, and he like trims the dog, and then he turns around and the bunny is all of a sudden like down on all fours. Jack's like, well, that can't be possible. I just trimmed its stomach. How would I have trimmed its stomach on the ground? Then he turns like back to the dog, and the dog's in like a different position too. And then the lions, right, are blocking the path now that he came
Yeah.
in there on. So he has this very weird encounter with this topiary hedge where they're like moving, but then he ends up thinking he just kind of hallucinated the whole thing, because after a while he kind of moves out of the area and then he looks back and they're all back in the same places. So he's like, oh, well, clearly I just thought of that.
Yeah, well, and Jack like doesn't believe the weird feelings he kind of, and Halloran even says like his mom doesn't shine, but like Jack doesn't necessarily not shine or shine. Like it's kind of it's kind of hard to it's almost like there's something weird with the way Jack, like his head is set up.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly how he describes it. He said all moms kind of have some shine. Like he thinks that all women or moms have a little bit of the shine. They might not have a lot, but that's exactly it. He kind of talks about Jack, and he knows something's off with Jack. Halloran can't quite put his finger on it. And what I kind of think it might be is that constantly throughout the book, we get Jack going back to other thoughts he had. So even like when he was doing the shingles, he's constantly going back to something else he was doing before. Like he'll go back and he was thinking about he had seen some other guys, dig up a bee's nest from underneath a rooftop, or when he's trimming the hedges, he found his mind wandering back to something else. So I don't necessarily know that, he doesn't have the shining, but it sounds like he might have some sort of weird recollective thing where he ends up kind of reliving memories in a way, I feel like. Like I was saying, the bees come up later in the story because Jack has this huge, long memory about his dad, his alcoholic, abusive father, killing this whole nest of wasps. So I think a lot of the stuff just ties back together, especially for Jack. A lot of these things come full circle back to him in the story. And they never really explain, though, they don't really ever explain what's going on as far as Jack with The Shining. We just know he doesn't necessarily have it, but he clearly has some sort of weird ability in his mind.
Right, and I didn't really fully understand that, and I didn't really fully understand. I guess we're past the spoilers anyway, but like, because the hotel is like able to use him, and I didn't understand why he was like more susceptible to that than Wendy was.
That I don't really know either. Yeah, and I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because Jack has a lot of freaking skeletons in his closet, maybe.
And
I mean,
he has a lot of trauma.
Yeah, and the hotel definitely plays on that. Right. So, spoiler alert from like towards the very end of the book is that the hotel is essentially a malevolent force now at this point too, because of how much violence and trauma has happened within its walls. Basically, the hotel has its own demons, essentially, like within its walls.
Right, and normally, from what I understood, normally these things aren't able to manifest because there's just not enough like energy. But since Danny is there, he's like a battery to like a car, and so he's like able to start it all.
Yeah, and then so something we forgot to mention too is that Danny has his quote unquote imaginary friend Tony.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
who
that.
who always shows up kind of when Danny goes into like a deep trance or when he goes too deep into The Shining, like if he's reaching really deep for someone else's memories, then his friend Tony will show up. And Tony, we don't really get a whole lot of like what Tony is, but
Well, they explain it
basically,
at the end.
well, isn't so Tony's basically like kind of like the force that is the Shining for Danny, right?
Well, it's Danny talking to himself is all it is.
Okay.
Like Tony's just himself.
He's basically okay. Yeah, you're right. Tony is how he manifests kind of what's happening with him.
Right, and Halloran talks a little bit about how his shining manifests. Like he smells oranges when something happens.
When something's gonna happen, right?
Yeah. And so, but Danny just has like Tony, which is basically like it's just like an older version of himself, who's kind of giving him like snippets of what's gonna happen.
Right, which is why he can never fully ever see
Right.
Tony in the
Right,
visions.
because Tony's always obscure or like far away.
Right. Basically, Tony is Danny's like intuition or his
Right.
subconscious.
Yeah,
okay.
the subconscious is a good way to put it.
That makes sense. But when they get to the hotel, because of all these malevolent forces now, he can't function correctly, so he leaves because he says that if I'm here, they don't want me here. These forces don't want me here. So basically his subconscious kind of gets fried while he's at the hotel.
Well, I kind of understood it as like it was blocking him, right?
Right. Well, and it's probably because it's using him as the energy source, essentially.
Yeah. And so Jack kind of like goes downstairs and starts like digging through the old records. And this is kind of how we find out about the hotel's checkered past.
Yeah.
And as he's reading these things, he's like thinking about like, oh man, I'm gonna write such a good book about all this shit. I can't wait. And the next so he drives himself to Sidewinder to call freaking what's that guy's name? The guy that's like the manager of the hotel.
It is. Why can't I think of it now? I can't think of it either right now. Keep talking, I'll find it and then I'll tell you.
Well, so he calls him and he's like, I'm gonna write a book about this place. I'm gonna tear this place down. And even like when he's saying this, I'm like, what are you thinking? You're freaking talking to your boss. Have you lost your damn mind?
Yeah, I couldn't really understand that part either. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it makes sense though because he has like such self-destructive tendencies and shit like that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I get the sense too, like he didn't really have a good outlet for his rage when he's up at the Overlook.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just like snaps and says all the dumbest stuff ever, and he's like talking about like how he's gonna like make the scathing book about the true history of the Overlook and all this stuff, and so the manager, I can't remember his name, he calls Al, his friend, and Al's like, what the hell are you thinking, man? Like you cannot do that if you want to work here.
Yeah.
And he gets like mad that he's like being restricted as a writer.
Right. But Al is also pissed because Al, they've both been stone sober, since they had all those issues. Back, they hit the car or they hit the bike and stuff. They've both been sober, and so Al is upset because he's like, dude, I did you a huge favor by getting you this job. Why would you try to, you're kind of tarnishing me by throwing Ullman, that's the guy's name.
Ullman, yeah.
By throwing Ullman under the bus. So it kind of snaps Jack out of it because he's like, oh, like you said, he all of a sudden he's like, whoa, yeah, what, where did all that come from?
Well, I want to say part of that is like the hotel's influence on him kind of messing with his head.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And basically this whole book is just his descent into madness.
That's exactly what it is. Is he's losing his mind, basically. So
right, and he doesn't even say anything to his family about calling them, huh?
No, but wasn't Danny with him, and Danny knows some of it?
Yeah, Danny knows some of it, yeah.
Yeah, Danny tells when they get back, Danny tells Wendy, he's like, Dad called Al, and Al, Al's mad at the book that Dad wants to write or whatever.
Yeah.
Basically kind of sums it all up.
And throughout the book too, he talks about like his play that he wants to write. And I like that it kind of like the way he wants to end it changes throughout the book, like as he like kind of descends into madness.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I'm trying to remember. So, and then after that, right, that's when they go back to the hotel and it starts snowing a bunch.
Yep.
And so that they kind of get trapped.
They basically get snowed in, yeah, because it dumps like 2 feet overnight.
And Danny goes to check out room 217.
217. Yep.
And because I mean he thinks that, I mean, he's been seeing weird things, like he thought the fire extinguisher hose was a snake. It like actually looked like a snake. It was moving like a snake. And there was another thing that happened, but none of the things have hurt him so far, so he didn't think anything bad was going to happen. And he goes up there, and it turns out like a lady had killed herself in that room, right? She like drowned herself in the tub.
I think she I think she OD'd,
Overdosed in the tub.
Yeah. But in the tub, yeah.
And she like, actually comes out of the tub and strangles Danny and like actually hurts him.
Yeah. Which was actually a pretty terrifying part, even
Yeah.
listening to, because he walks in and there's this old dead woman in the tub, like rotten, bloated, disgusting old corpse in the tub, and she opens her eyes and starts smiling at him, and then gets out, and he turns and he runs to the door, but he's like, for some reason I couldn't remember that it was unlocked, so
Well,
he's like
he's
fumbling
5.
with it. Yeah. And
Like,
so you think like he's hallucinating, but then he gets downstairs and his mom's like, "Wow, why do you have all those bruises around your neck?" Because this
Yeah.
freaking corpse legitimately grabbed him and tried to choke him.
well, and Jack almost doesn't believe him at all that happened.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and
he's
then
like,
Wendy,
how did you bruise your neck?
this is where a weird like dichotomy comes in every time. So anytime anything happens to Danny, Wendy automatically assumes, because of Jack's drinking days and because Jack broke Danny's arm the one time, that it's Jack's fault. Jack did it. But then when Danny comes running in and he says, "She choked me. She choked me." Jack's like, "What did you do to him, Wendy?" And it like
Yeah.
the hotel is like playing on their emotions against each other to
Yeah,
try to
it
kind
really
of
is.
force this unrest. That's how I perceive that, basically, is that
It is.
it's it was just taking advantage of the situation where Wendy already doesn't trust Jack around Danny, but then Jack is also already pissed off at Wendy.
Well, yeah, and they're kind of like walking on eggshells anyway, as in their marriage.
Right.
Like, so yeah, so Jack ends up going back up to 217, and he doesn't see anything at first, right? But then he like sees something behind the shower curtain.
Well, it
But, like,
starts out super subtle because he's like, "Why is there a bath mat in here?
Yeah.
There shouldn't be one." Yeah, and then all of a sudden he's leaving the room and the shower curtain closes behind him, and when he turns around, he can clearly see something is in the bathtub. But he's like,
Yeah.
"Nope, I'm just imagining it," and he leaves the room. Like he
Yeah.
does not want to acknowledge any of it.
Well, he's pretty much in denial the whole time that anything is wrong.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. He doesn't think, even after he saw all the stuff in the maze, or
Yeah.
in the hedges, after the bathroom stuff, he's just in denial about all of it.
And then I'm trying to think of the next like so the next big thing that happens, right, is he like goes snowshoeing outside, right?
Yeah, by himself. That's when he goes to the little park, right? Little kid
Right.
park.
Yeah. And he like digs down in the snow.
Yep.
And
I don't
he
know
like
if it's
digs down.
necessarily the next big thing, but yeah, that's a good point to talk
Well,
about.
it's just hard to get, like, I feel like we get lost in the weeds trying to talk about all the, because
I
there
know.
is a lot of conversations that happen in this book.
Yeah, and we're definitely jumping around a lot, but that's because like we're trying to kind of keep it cohesive. But again, like I said in the beginning, I feel like it's harder to explain the book without jumping around and gathering more information for the set piece you're talking about
Because
first.
we're not Stephen King, and it's a lot of the story is in like the small details in the conversations that they have.
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
So Danny goes outside and he wants to snowshoe so bad because he loves his daddy and his daddy's really good at snowshoeing. So he like has figured it out how to snowshoe really well.
Right.
And he walks down to the park and he like digs like a tunnel down right to this like concrete what would you call that? I can't even think of what it's called.
Um, I yeah, I don't know either. It's basically like the way I kind of understood it is like the whole playground thing is under the snow, right? So he
Right.
basically digs a tunnel that then gets him into like the playground thing, right? It's kind of how I understood it.
So he digs down and he like finds something down there.
Yeah.
I don't really think this part was hard for me to understand. What
I'm
he
not gonna
exactly.
lie, it was hard for me to understand too. But the way I understand it, right, is that like what some kid died there, right,
Yeah.
at the playground.
Mhm.
So basically, he gets hit with all these emotions of what happened in the past because his shining, it lets all that stuff in like a freaking loudspeaker for him.
Right. And so he like nothing ends up happening to him. He like panics and runs. And when he's running back, he like trips over the fence and falls in the snow. And anybody, I don't know if you've ever been on snowshoes, but if you fall down, it is so hard to get back up.
Yeah, well, like snowboarding, yeah, if you fall in really
Yeah.
soft snow, you cannot just put your hands down and get
Well,
up when the
yeah, you
snow
go to
is
push
3
it,
feet deep.
you just push right back down because
Yeah,
you're not gonna like immediately have the same tension there.
right. I can
And
definitely see too how that would build, like that part built some tension for me because I know what that feeling
dude,
is.
and for me, every time it happens, it's immediate panic. It's like,
Yeah,
oh my god, I have to get out of here as fast as I can.
right. And it's panic when nothing bad's happening. So think about
Exactly.
if something bad, if you had an already bad feeling, or if something was chasing you, like in this part, then yeah, I could see how that built a lot of tension.
So Danny like gets up right, and he's like running back to the porch, and the hedge animals have like moved to block his way.
Right. Yeah.
And so they like chase him, and the lion scratches him pretty good on the way
Yep.
back. And he like passes out on the porch because he's just exhausted. And Jack like doesn't believe that it was the hedge animals that scratched him. He thinks he scratched himself when he fell over the fence.
Right. Even though Jack clearly knows there's something going on with the hedge animals.
Well, and he even said like it's almost like he has two voices in his head because he even says he's like, but what about that time when you trimmed the hedges? And he was like, no,
Yeah.
that was my imagination. And
Yep.
I kind of I get the feeling it's like Jack's consciousness fighting against what the hotel's trying to tell him.
Right. Well, and it kind of goes back to like what you're talking about, where he's talking about, I didn't turn back, or I didn't set forward your timer, and then as the story progresses, he's like, it might have only been for a minute or two.
Yeah.
Every time it gets a little bit skewed. So yeah, we definitely find out Jack is definitely like split down the middle from all the trauma that he's had in his life.
Well, and I mean, and we find out too, like his dad was a freaking wife beater and a piece of shit and a
Right.
drunk too.
Yeah, his dad, yeah, was the alcoholic, abusive, freaking psychopath, basically. Dude, that part where his dad snaps on his mom, like my freaking jaw dropped
Me too.
in my
It's
car.
it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, like, I mean, I won't even explain the whole thing, but like I definitely my jaw dropped and my eyes like shot wide open because I was like, holy crap, that's terrifying.
Yeah. It was pretty harsh. And
So,
is this the part when Danny starts calling for Halloran?
um, no. I just know that I think we've missed a couple times that Jack has found himself in the Colorado Lounge with the
Oh, right.
bartender, and he's lining up drinks for Jack. And the
No, I actually don't
bar.
think that has started yet.
Oh, really? I thought it
Yeah.
was right around this
Uh-uh.
point. Well, so either way, Jack ends up finding himself in the Colorado Lounge bar in the hotel with a bartender.
This is like next though. This
Right.
is like right after this.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Um, and then, uh, so Jack ends up drinking while he's in this bar, but it's not real. However,
Well, and
some it's it's very muddy. It's very muddy here, and this is kind of what I mean by like this is kind of hard to follow in some instances because he's not drinking. Obviously, it's not real. However, he definitely after there's all these people in there having a party and whatever, and Jack's drinking and he's having a good time, and then all of a sudden it's all gone. However, he feels drunk. Like
Well,
he feels
that
like he
and
had been drinking.
that and even before these bartender scenes start showing up, he's doing a lot of the things he used to do when he was a drunk. Like he's chewing up aspirin. He's like rubbing his lips all the time.
I was just gonna talk about that too.
And
Yeah.
he's like acting like he's an alcoholic again, even though he's not drinking.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Those are the tendencies he had when he was drinking. He would, like you said, he would chew his Excedrin. He would just
Which
throw
is
it in his mouth and
disgusting.
chew it. Oh my gosh.
Oh, dude,
That
it makes me sick thinking about it.
Yeah, that and even the rubbing his lips with his hands to the point where his lips are like raw. That was like making me like cringe every time he would talk about it.
Well, and he savors the bitter taste of the aspirin. It's like, oh, it's so
Yeah.
disgusting, dude.
Yeah.
Ugh, fucked up.
Yeah, it was that part is bizarre.
So like Ryan said, there's like these scenes where he's like drinking and he's like talking to these people in the bar, but there's nobody there. But they like even the other family members can kind of hear things going on.
Right, they can hear Jack talking very clearly, and they can also hear someone else talking, basically. Wendy can, which we should mention, like, basically the things you know are serious is when Wendy can also hear or comprehend it too.
Yeah.
Because she has a little bit of the shine, but not like Danny.
And I think is one of the scenes when they're partying is when Jack meets the old caretaker that was at the Overlook.
Yeah,
And
and
he
he is now like the bartender.
Right. And he's telling him like that he needs to correct his family if he wants to be management at the hotel.
Yeah, he starts feeding Jack these lines about like you can own this place, man, because he says that's where it gets weird too, is that this guy explains to Jack that he's like, what do you mean the manager? He's like, the hotel is the manager, man. The hotel is in charge. Like it starts getting like, what is happening?
And the hotel kind of even takes on a character of its own a little bit, like in the things that Jack thinks are like just raw the hotel's thoughts.
Yeah, because it also is trying to like ruin him. Because like when they try to leave and he goes out to start the snowmobile, and he just takes off the magneto piece and just hucks it out into the snow, so he can't ever find it again until spring. Like
And
the
he's,
hotel
like,
made
so
him do it.
mad that the
Yeah.
hotel, like that the snowmobile is even functioning. He's
Right.
like angry as he gets that
Yeah.
the snowmobile even works.
And he's mad that his family wants to leave. He's like,
Yeah.
why would you want to leave? Why would we leave this place?
And so I think this is when Danny like starts mentally calling for Halloran, right?
Yeah, I think that's when he starts calling, because it's very, very close to the end when Danny
I think there's about
calls
like
out
4
to Halloran.
hours left.
Yeah. But so Danny ends up doing what Halloran said, because now Danny's freaking out because he can obviously listen in like on his dad's conversations in his head, and he knows something's going on with his dad. He knows something's wrong with Jack. So he calls for Halloran because he's in danger now.
And I mean I like the part like where we kind of get a snippet of Halloran's life, and
That was
Halloran
awesome.
basically drops everything to come help him.
Yeah. And he even says, he's like, as he's like going, he's like, what am I going to do? Go get myself killed for a, little white family up in the mountains?
Yeah.
And he's like, absolutely. Because he talks about himself as a flashlight and that kid, Danny, as a spotlight. That's how
Yeah.
powerful Danny's magic is, basically.
And yeah, so Halloran has like, and of course when Halloran like is on his way, it's like the nastiest snowstorm ever. And while Halloran's on his way, Jack has pretty much lost his mind and is like
Yeah.
openly. So they basically lock him downstairs. Like he's not allowed to come up to where they are anymore.
Right. Because like Wendy doesn't want him around anymore because he's basically gone insane. Like by this point, he's lost his mind. He's like just walking around,
Well, and he's
talking
like,
nonsense.
and he's like drunk.
Yes, that's That's kind of what I mean. Is during one of the last times where he's in the Colorado Lounge and Grady, that's the other guy's name.
Oh yeah, good. Good job.
That's the old I have it on my screen. I won't lie to everybody. I have it on my screen.
No,
I
don't
couldn't
ruin the
have
magic.
Anyways, he so Grady basically is feeding him all these drinks, but at some point it's not real. However, all of a sudden even Wendy can smell the alcohol on, because they talk about that every time she goes in for like a hug, that after she hasn't seen him for a while, she kind of smells him. Well, at one point she can definitely tell he smells like gin, like that piney smell of gin. So
well, and she even has like a long. There's literally like an hour that is just her thinking to herself, like, where could this alcohol even have come from? Because there isn't any there.
Right. There's no alcohol in the entire hotel. It was all put away basically for the winter.
And I didn't really understand if the hotel was just making him think he was drunk or if it was actually like making alcohol. I didn't really understand.
I don't know either. I mean, I think that the fact that she can smell it could be because she kind of has the shining, or we know it can physically affect things because the friggin' lady choked Danny. So it can physically have an effect. So I don't exactly know how it's happening, but the hotel is definitely now, taking drastic measures to get Jack on its side, basically.
Yeah, it's basically it stopped being subtle and it is like taking on full-on control of Jack.
Exactly.
And it's like helping him out too.
That's what because they lock him in the pantry and Grady shows up in the pantry and is like, "Oh, you let him get the better of you? You let this, your wife, a woman, and your little kid get the better of you?" And then Grady unlocks the door for him and lets him out.
He unlocks the door for him, and like waiting for him is like a bottle of gin and a roque mallet.
Yeah. Yes. Yep. You're right.
And basically at this point, like Jack's thoughts are so crazy, like erratic. Like this I think is when the Campbell Scott is amazing.
Oh
because, like Jack's like conversation, because he's trying to like get them back on his side. And so he's like normal, and then they say something he doesn't like, and he immediately like flies off the handle and comes in like unglued and then snaps at them. And Campbell Scott does such a good job of like showing that unhingedness in his voice even.
Well, and that's just it. He like a lot of narrators, they'll, even if it's like a high tension or highly emotional part, they might not pour a lot of emotion into it when they're saying it. But I would say that Campbell Scott, he does. He sounds mad when he's saying these things.
Super mad.
Yeah, and he does an impressive job.
Jack ends up he beats up on Wendy, and he's like about to kill her, but then he like gets this idea in his head. It's like, oh, I'm not gonna lie to you guys. This book says the N-word a couple times.
Oh yeah, quite a few times.
He's African American, and he's coming, and he's like, oh man, I have to stop this stupid N-word from coming in our business.
Because so all of a sudden
he lets her leave.
Right, because Jack now knows that Halloran's on his way to save them, because whether it's his weird thing that his mind has or it's the hotel, whatever it is, Jack knows. And that's exactly right. And you're putting it very lightly. The part where he's beating up on Wendy is like, it's almost hard to listen to me.
Well, the thing, Wendy like straight up pretty much kills him, like stabs him with a kitchen knife, and he like doesn't die.
Yeah, she stabs him in his low back, where how I pictured it was probably like where your kidneys are. She buries this freaking kitchen knife
like into the handle.
Yeah, and he doesn't even hardly notice it. So now you know he's kind of being like driven by some other force, basically. It's no longer just Jack.
I kind of thought about it as like I think the hotel can only manifest certain things, like things that have actually happened at the hotel, and it probably didn't have like a true force other than Jack that it could use.
Sure. Well, and we even get a little snippet of that when Danny is like, "You're not my dad. You're not really my dad. You're a monster wearing
hang
my
on,
dad."
hang on. Let's go back and talk about Halloran first, and then we'll come back to this part because I know exactly what you're talking about, and that part's good too. But
right.
So Halloran, like he shows up on a snowmobile, and the hedge maze, like the lions attack him.
Yeah, like legit attack him, like try to kill him to
like,
stop
pull
him
off
from
the snowmobile. Yeah.
Yeah, they try to stop him from interfering with what's going to happen.
I wanted to talk to you about this part. So when they find Jack passed out, that's when they're able to lock him in the pantry because he's passed out. And one of the things he says is, "No, you have to use gasoline. Let me see that lighter." Is he talking about what Halloran ends up doing?
I don't know. Like, is it like hinting at it?
Yeah.
Because
to me, it was like Jack's consciousness trying to help them when he was sleeping.
Apologize to everyone for my dog barking in the back.
That's Archie, everybody.
So, but what Jack's dreaming about, right, is when his dad burns that other bee's nest.
Oh. Okay.
Remember? Because he's dreaming about that time when his dad smoked those bees out. He made the bees drunk, and then he burned them to kill them.
Right. Oh my God! Never mind. I didn't even make the connection until now. You made it so much clearer. Okay. Okay. Never mind. Because I thought he was talking about what Halloran did, but it actually makes more sense.
Well, did he pass out or did she knock him out?
No, he passed out. He was passed out drunk when they lock him in the pantry.
Is that what it was when they're moving him? See, I can't remember now.
Because she goes down to make a sandwich and she's like worried. She's like worried about him and she's like carrying a kitchen knife wrapped up. But then he's passed out on the ground in the Colorado Lounge, I think. And so they take him and they lock him in the pantry.
I thought she knocked him out. I
don't think so.
I thought she knocked him out. Either way, it's semantics, I guess. Either way, he got locked in the pantry and the freaking ghost Grady let him out.
Yeah, which is so weird.
It was kind of bizarre. And then Grady's like, "You got to tell them, they need to take their medicine."
Yeah.
Which we find out when we get that flashback to his dad beating on his mom. He's telling her that too. You're going to take your medicine,
Well, and the thing that's crazy is like as he becomes more insane, he becomes sympathetic with his dad and like understands what his dad was trying to do.
Yeah.
It's like,
dude,
oh my God.
That was like psychologically terrifying because he starts to
so
basically,
scary.
like you said, sympathize with his dad, and he's like, "My dad was right. My mom was worthless. All she ever did is, nag at him and drag him down." And it's like, whoa, now you're you're justifying him beating the shit out of her with a cane because she nagged him. And in the flashback, even we find out his mom was she didn't hardly ever say anything. She was just super passive.
Well, and they went to the hospital, and his dad's like, "She fell down some stairs," and she's like, "Yeah, I fell down some stairs."
Yeah, and the doctor's like, "Huh? So when she fell down the stairs in the living room, her glasses ended up all the way over here, and her food in the kitchen, huh?"
Yeah.
Like, it was pretty scary.
So Halloran he fights off the hedge monsters, and he gets into the hotel, and Jack's like waiting for him. And
so I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know what was gonna happen in this part because
me neither. I had no idea.
Well, I had guesses because I remember this part in the movie, but I was glad to find out that what happens in the book is not what happens in the movie. So,
okay, I didn't know what happens in the book. So yeah, they end up scuffling, right?
Sorta. I mean, basically, Jack just whacks him a good one with his freaking roque mallet.
Because he's already really hurt from the lion.
Yeah, the lion scratched him up pretty good.
Yeah, so he just whacks him, and then like Halloran passes out, right?
Yeah, because Jack breaks his jaw with
Yeah.
one swing of this roque mallet.
And see, I'm a little fuzzy about what happens here. So from here, don't we go into because Danny is dreaming, right?
I think so, yeah.
And this is where we find out the truth about Tony, that Tony's just Danny. And like Tony tells Danny, it's like you're gonna remember something. It's in the basement and it's gonna save you.
Right. Yep. You're gonna remember something that your dad forgot.
Right.
Yeah. And basically, then so Jack turns his attention back to Wendy, who has now crawled to the bedroom, and she locks herself in. And then Jack comes up there with his freaking roque mallet and starts beating the door down because he just has lost his marbles. He's gonna kill everyone. And oh my god, it makes me cringe. He breaks a hole big enough in the door so he can reach in to unlock the door, and
Yeah.
Wendy cuts the back of his hand
Yeah.
with freaking razors from the bathroom. Oh god.
That part's pretty hardcore.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that part made me cringe so hard. Just so descriptive too.
Yeah, it was amazing.
But so
And-
that's when this is when Danny, this is like what I was talking
Yeah,
about.
it
Is
is.
Danny starts basically fighting back against the hotel, and he basically like he knows his mom is hurt because we find out later he freaking broke her back when he hit her. And then Danny basically is like, basically the pick on someone your own size kind of line. Tells Jack, why don't you come after me?
Well, and he
And,
even says to him, he's like, I'm not afraid of you, and you're not
Yeah.
my daddy. And like for a
Exactly.
little bit, like the mask kind of slips, and like Jack comes back for like a second, and he's
Yeah.
like normal again.
Yep. Yeah, so now there's a struggle inside Jack a little bit between whether or not he should kill everyone or whether or not he should, leave the hotel. Like it's like this really quick, short little struggle in his head. Because that's what Danny keeps telling him. You're not my daddy. You're a monster wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Because, and, jumping around a little bit, but back before, the party that's in the Colorado Lounge at one point is a masquerade ball type
Right.
thing.
And they constantly say throughout the book, unmask, unmask.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it all kind of ties together very, very elegantly.
And so like Jack kind of comes at Danny, but then Danny remembers that the boiler hasn't been dumped off in like over a day and a half.
The pressure, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And so he says something to Jack. He's like, you haven't even checked on the pressure. And he's like, I will not let you win on like such a technicality like that. Like I'm going to stop you. And so he tries to go down and deal with the pressure, but it's too late.
That part too, just before we say that obviously the hotel explodes, but when he freaking reaches for this valve, which is obviously a steam valve and it's not protected, Jack has no gloves on. He grabs this thing. It's scalding hot. It's literally like melting the palms of his hands. Oh god, it just it was so vivid to me. Like,
well, and he actually gets it to start going down. He's like, success, I win, and then it explodes.
Yeah, so and when he gets to it, right, like the guy had said it's good to 250 and the pressure's already at like 285 when he gets down there. Yeah, so it's already like way beyond what it ever even should have been. And then he turns it and he's like, I did it, I beat all of them, and then the hotel just freaking explodes. It explodes in his face.
And so like they go to leave on the snowmobile. Go ahead.
Well, before that, Halloran did wake up with, Wendy woke him up, and they do get outside and they get on the snowmobile before the hotel explodes.
Yeah, they do. They get out. And then they go to get like some blankets from the shed, right? And then the hotel like tries to take over Halloran.
Yeah, it does, because for like a quick second, he has this thought of basically killing the two of them, right?
Yeah, he does. And I even love that like his thought process about why they needed to die is so much different than Jack's in his head. Because he even says, like, he's like, why am I even helping these white people?
Yep. Yeah.
And
Yeah, he basically is like, look at her. She's not even going to live a couple more hours. And,
Yeah.
look at this little kid. He doesn't even have any shoes on or something like to that effect. They're not going to live. He's like, just leave them here. And this is all as the hotel is like, it's right before, yeah, that's right. It's right after it's like burning down. And it's like melting from the inside, basically.
Yeah.
Doesn't he say, too, that like he looks back and like, he can basically see, like, as the middle is falling in, like, spirits leaving the hotel. Yeah, that's right. Or the spirit of the hotel being, forced out.
And they make it down, and then it cuts to like an epilogue of like Danny and Wendy are living with Halloran.
Yeah, and Wendy's in a freaking back brace because, like I said, find out he broke her back when he hit her with a roque mallet.
And yeah, that's pretty much The Shining.
And what's interesting is that so it starts out as not too scary in the hotel. It's like towards the end, especially, it's kind of terrifying. And then at the end, you're like, oh, well, that's not so bad of an ending. Like,
but it seems like it's gonna get real dark though when Halloran shows up and Jack. It seems like Jack's gonna kill him. He's gonna kill everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know what happens in the movie. I haven't seen it yet, but
that's why we're gonna watch it, and that's why we'll discuss that, because I think this is especially a good one to do that on, and we'll discuss kind of the differences and what we, our thoughts on it a little bit. And I know I looked up too, there is a Shining miniseries that I think Stephen King more had his hand in. For anyone who doesn't know, the Shining movie was done by Stanley Kubrick, so I'm sure if we talk shit about it, a lot of people are going to rise up against us because they think Stanley Kubrick's the greatest. Maybe we'll finally get a first piece of email.
Bring it on, you pieces of trash.
But yeah, that's essentially that. I mean, that's the Shining book. And come to find out, this Dr. Sleep book that Bo and I have been talking about, because I just recently saw it up here, is actually going to be the sequel to The Shining, and it's going to be released next month. So
no, the book's already out. The movie is coming out next month.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you are 100% right. The book came out in 2013. That's right.
Right. It's actually that's a huge gap between the two books.
It kind of is, yeah. Wow, interesting then. I definitely need to listen to the book, Dr. Sleep, and then watch the film too. I'd be curious about that.
Super interested because I thought The Shining was amazing. Like, it is. I mean, there's a reason why Stephen King he has so many books that are like all considered classics, because he's an amazing writer.
Yeah,
he really is.
Absolutely. It is not. I think when it comes to Stephen King, it's not hype, and it's not. It's for a reason. I mean, and I wouldn't say we've listened to like a ton of Stephen King books. I think this is only maybe the third, because what do we say? Dreamcatchers, It, and now The Shining.
No, but I feel like I listened to another one, but I can't remember what it is.
And we probably have. We might have had one from back in the day. But even just like say those three books as a sample, it obviously is incredibly iconic for more than one reason. But even Dreamcatcher is not. That was an awesome book, even back in the day when I didn't even, I didn't know shit about shit. That was a great book. I mean, but it's not because, it's not because of the content. It's because of the way Stephen King did it.
He's so good. His character design, I think, is like unrivaled in my opinion, because like the characters have so many layers, and the way he like slowly reveals them to you is really well done.
Well, and then the way he and the way you go back and you get snippets from earlier in that person's life to bring you back to present as to why things are happening. He does that throughout most of his books that that I've listened to. And that's a very, very effective way, I think, to build a character instead of being like, this is Jack. Jack is an aspiring writer who was a teacher, and now he's going to be the caretaker of this hotel. Ready, set, go. Like,
He was an alcoholic with a violent past.
right. Yeah. That because he could do that, and there are other books that do that. They drop a character in, they give you as many details as they can in 8 paragraphs, and that's it. We don't really go back and learn about anything that's ever happened in this person's past. And in other books that do that, it doesn't make it feel like you know that character as well, because you don't know anything else other than the little bit of 2D screen time you've gotten right in front of you.
Right. Yeah, it's just so good. It's good. It's good. Just go listen to it.
Yeah,
I haven't seen the
it
movie.
is
I
good.
can't say. I don't know if the movie's good.
No, that's why we are going to try for next week. We will both watch the movie again, and that'll be next week's episode. Is we want to talk about the movie. I would like to maybe, if you don't have to, if you don't want, I'm going to try to find that TV miniseries too, because
I thought you were talking about the documentary.
no, I would like to do the documentary too. I want to talk about that for sure. If you watch the movie, the Shining movie that Stanley Kubrick did, and you have to watch that documentary. It's called Room 237, I believe, and you have to watch that because you'll never just facepalm harder in your life, basically.
Yeah, because Ryan showed me some clips from it. These people are crazy.
Oh yeah, just down the deepest of rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And I want to find that. I'd like to find the TV miniseries because I think the TV miniseries, like I said, Stephen King had more of his hand in it. So it's much more true to the book than Stanley Kubrick's. I think Stanley Kubrick just took a lot of creative luxuries, basically, or creative liberties. Yes, thank you. Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. However, now knowing what I know about the book, I think, well, we'll talk about it when we talk about the next, after we watch the movie, because I think there's a lot of really good points to be brought up, especially between these two.
Right. Yeah. So, I think I'm ready to wrap this one up, Ryan. What do you got? Anything else you want to say?
No, other than I just want to touch on a couple things for anybody else who's still here with us after this nice long episode. We said this towards the beginning of our podcast, but we would kind of like to keep this unedited as far as we can. And I just think for anybody who thinks that's stupid, like it's a waste of time because it's long or whatever, in my opinion, I think it just makes it real. It's just a real conversation between the two of us. There is no, I didn't want to say that. Can we go cut that out and retake it? This is not a reality TV show where it's quote unquote real. This is just raw audio that we have a Skype call and we talk about our thoughts and we upload it. And so for anyone who, doesn't like that, I would say just keep that in mind. It is just a real conversation between the two of us.
And if you don't like it, you can send me an email about it.
Exactly. But it's not. That's all I kind of wanted the podcast to be, though, is just kind of real. I didn't want it to be. I've listened to plenty of podcasts that are scripted, and we have a small outline that we like to follow. We don't stick to it perfectly, but it just makes sure we hit some key points.
I was gonna say, for me, it's just like, okay, did we talk about these things?
Right, and that's we kind of laid it out just for that reason. We wanted to talk about some key points, make sure we hit those. But as far as like for the talking about the story itself of these books that we're doing, we could just as easily go Google a summary of the story and read it to you. That's not what we're after here. We're
and
just
I don't want
trying
this to
give
feel
you...
like a book report either.
Exactly, and I think that is kind of what we started out feeling like in the beginning, but I think we've done a lot better. I think in just we're trying to hit highlights and hit the things that really either make us like or dislike the book. So I
Right.
hope that people can appreciate that it's just, like I said, it's just a real conversation between us about a book that we either like or dislike or are indifferent about.
And
So
I want to apologize too for our faithful 3 listeners that listen whenever I post the podcast the day of. That sorry this podcast is late. Me and Ryan have just kind of been busy, and we've been having a couple technical issues that
yeah.
we couldn't really like work around for the past few days. That's why this podcast is a little bit late. The next one will be up by Thursday, so you don't have to worry about that. But I'm sorry about this one being late. And oh, also, I want to mention that it's spooky month. That's why we're looking at The Shining first, is so that because it's October, you gotta look at scary stuff.
Yeah, we're gonna try to do some more scary stuff for October, and so with the I just want to mention this too. With us watching a movie for next week, we don't want to make that a huge habit because, like, obviously we're not going to we listen to The Hobbit, but we're not going to go watch all the Hobbit movies and talk to you about that. But I think there will be a few that come up that are books and movies that we would like to touch base on both subjects just because we think they might be good to talk about.
I think The Shining is perfect because both of them are like considered a masterpiece in their own right.
Sure. That's a very good point. Because what Stephen King is to writing, Stanley Kubrick was to directing. So
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And
so it'll be interesting to see this all came out of Stephen King's mind, like Bo said, a masterpiece. Therefore, let's see how Stanley Kubrick puts it onto movie, which I'm going to give him a ton of credit. I couldn't do it. I mean, the book it's so much internal dialogue and stuff that anything you put on screen would be incredibly hard to do. So I will give him props there. And then after we both, watch the movie, we'll talk a little bit more about how we actually feel about the movie itself. So, but I just want to touch on that. Like, I don't want anybody who is listening to think, oh my God, now they're going to start watching movies only. Like, that's not going to happen.
Unless you want that to happen. And then you can send us an email and persuade us to think about it, even though not do it.
Well, that is a good point, though. I mean, like I said, I don't think every book that is a movie needs to be, we don't need to talk about every movie, but we are definitely open to what are some good ones. Like, what are ones you really should, do both.
Yeah. And that's a really good point too. And I also want to say, like, if you have a favorite book that you're like, man, this audiobook is the reason I like audiobooks, like, please send those suggestions to us too. Like, I would really like that.
Yeah, no, and that is a great idea too, because that will help us kind of broaden. We're trying to kind of reach out to books we haven't listened to before, or maybe genres we might not have touched on before for our own personal selves, but we're trying to branch out to maybe, if you're someone who doesn't like horror, well, maybe next week's book, if it's about, an action thriller, maybe that's more your speed, or a romance novel, maybe that's more your speed.
And I know you don't want to do romance novels, but I feel like we have to. We got to try some.
We're gonna do it. We have most of the rest of our year laid out, and in February, month of isn't that when we did it, for February of next year? Yeah, for February
we're
of
looking
next
at
year,
the
Valentine's Day. Yeah. Don't worry, we're gonna get outside our comfort zone. Don't worry.
You fools can't get salty if we don't like it, though.
Well, they can.
You're right. They can't get salty.
Entitled...
They can send me 10 emails. I don't care.
That's right.
Do it.
Because we're entitled to our opinion. You are more than entitled to yours. Yeah. And we don't. I don't want to become like some other podcasts that are like, we only like the good comments, not the bad ones. Like,
oh no, feel free to roast us. I can guarantee you cannot hurt my feelings.
I mean, you could try.
Oh yeah, please do try. And don't be surprised if I write something back.
Oh, we forgot to mention this, man. I forgot. I'll update the thing right now. We have we're on Reddit too, for anyone who wants to get us over there. What is our our Reddit?
It's KOTPL, just like the email, because Knights of the Pages Library was too long.
Sure. Okay, so that's the Reddit page is KOTPL. So there you go. If you want to go over there, and I know there's a lot of people over there, so get on over there and s- uh, we haven't really mentioned this before, but definitely tell your friends.
Oh
Spread it
yeah.
to your friends. If you think
Tell
if you
tell the
if you
homeless
like
guy
what
on
we're
the
doing,
street. I don't care.
yeah, he probably has a phone, so he can probably
Yeah.
get this. So he might not have a house, but he's probably got a phone, and he probably has internet. So yeah, let him know.
Yeah. Oh, and do you want to talk about? I don't think we really talked about interacting with Scott McCormick. I knew it was just a little bit, but still, it's kind of
Oh,
cool.
yeah, no, I didn't really bring that up. Yeah, so a few weeks back we did the Rivals Frenemies Who Changed the World book by Scott McCormick. And I upload most of these audio files onto YouTube. I'm falling behind rapidly, but I uploaded that one to YouTube, and Scott McCormick actually commented on the video and thanked us for reviewing his book, which
Yeah,
was
isn't that cool?
incredible. That is possibly the coolest thing I've ever seen. So
Dude, like when you said that to me, I was like, no way.
yeah, I screenshot it and sent it to Bo, and yeah, I mean,
Like that's so cool.
yeah, that's really cool, and I mean, I couldn't have asked for more in terms of even like interaction with an author, let alone that. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I would like to thank you guys too. Like I know there are a couple of you that come back every week, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, and I don't think we say that enough. I do eh, to us, as I've said many times, this was just going to be a conversation between the two of us. We figured we might as well record it, put it out there for people to listen to. So for anyone to take the time to listen to that, I greatly appreciate that, and it does mean a lot to us. We don't care that we're not seeing high numbers. The fact that we're seeing numbers at all is
Yeah,
cool to us.
it is
So
pretty cool.
it really
So,
is.
so yeah,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, definitely thank you for anybody who's listening, especially if you're still listening at this point, because I know we're pushing our time way up there right now.
This was an hour and a half. It's not that bad.
Oh, okay, that's actually not that bad considering it was a 16-hour deep dive of a book.
Well, I mean, we did leave out a lot, to be fair, just because it's hard to get all the conversations in there.
That's true. But again, we also like you said, we don't want this to necessarily just be a book report. You can go read a summary of the book online. We don't want it to be that. So
Right. So yeah, I think I'm good. Unless you have anything else you want to say, Ryan.
nope, I think I'm good, and I hope to catch you guys on the next one.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time for the Shining movie.
There you go.
Bye.